I used to hate RDLs. I could never figure them out. I could never figure out how to feel it in the right place. I used to always feel it in my low back. I don't know, I just couldn't connect with my hammies and my glutes. So over the past 4 years of lots of trial and error, I feel like I haven't mastered it per se, but I've learned some cues along the way that have helped my RDL so much that now my Romanian deadlift is my bread and butter. I love doing it. I love how much it's grown my hammies. I swear to God, it's grown the crap out of my hammies. I RDL twice a week currently. And so I want to share those cues with you because if you're also struggling to figure it out, hopefully these cues can help you just like they've helped me. So today we're going to go over 7 cues. A couple disclaimers. These cues might work for you. They might not. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Bitch, not everything is going to work for everybody. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2, these cues are going to be shared in the context of building muscle. So these cues are cues that I've learned have helped me really feel it in the target muscle. So for me, I like to do Romanian deadlifts to bias my hamstrings for hamstring growth. But the glutes are involved, of course, and you can also bias the RDLs to feel it more in your glutes, which I can show you how to do that as well. So that's number 2. Number 3, some people call it RDL, some people call it straight leg deadlift. Call it what you want. I'm going to show you what my definition of an RDL is. And let's get started, okay? So for today's demonstration, I'm going to be doing a landmine Romanian deadlift. I really have been liking either a landmine RDL or doing an RDL on the shrug machine, or I like to do RDLs on a Smith machine. And this is because I have found that doing RDLs with something that can stabilize me helps me feel it more in my hammies and helps me really be able to push my hips back. So you can totally do RDLs with like a barbell, and I have before with dumbbells. I've done that too with a kettlebell, whatever, but that might be my first tip is choosing a stable variation, at least as a beginner. It might really help you learn how to feel it in the hammies and in the glutes and not in the low back, okay? So that was the unofficial tip number 1. But the real tip number 1 is instead of thinking of the RDL as an up and down movement, think of it as a back and forth movement. So you're not thinking about picking up the weight and putting the weight back down. The weight is just in your hands because you need to load your body somehow. So in our case, it's in our hands. But like, for example, you could load the weight on your back and then that would be a good morning. But for the RDL, we're loading it in our hands, but the hands are not doing the work. It's all in the hips, bitch. So it's a hinging movement. So you're pushing your hips back and then pushing your hips forward. I've heard some people talk about thinking about shutting the car with your hips. Like you got groceries in your hands and you're just trying to close the car door. That's really helped people. Another cue that I've heard that has really helped people is pretend that there's like a string coming out of your asshole and someone is pulling that string backwards and they're pulling your hips backwards. So we're pushing our hips back as far as the hips will go. That's how you do an RDL. Moving on, tip number 2. Something that has really helped me feel RDLs in my legs is also thinking about creating force through my feet. So I'm driving my feet into the ground as I push my hips forward and I'm standing up. So I'm pushing through the feet. Some people like to tell you to only put your weight in your heels, and that can work, I guess, but I like to put my weight through my whole foot, and that kind of feeds into tip number 3. I like to perform the movement slow and controlled. So as I'm going down, the eccentric, right, the going down part, the negative, I'm going nice and slow. And RDLs are kind of a bitch for that reason because you have to go slow to really like feel and focus on the stretch. Because as we know, everyone's been talking about it, we really want to train muscles in the stretch position and spend more time in the stretch position. There's just been a lot of research coming out lately that that's the best way to tear muscle fibers and cause damage to the muscle. So I'm going to go nice and slow, stick my butt out, push my butt as far back as I can so I can feel that stretch through the backside of my legs. I'll even feel the stretch in my calves, bro. And then I explode upwards in that mind of muscle. you're focusing on squeezing the hammies, like squeezing the glutes. Like it's so intentional the whole time that I'm doing RDLs. I'm thinking about squeezing my entire lower body. It's not even funny. So that I don't let the load of the weight transfer to my low back. I'm squeezing my legs so hard that my back never even had a chance. It's like, girl, we don't need you. We're busy. Like, we got enough hands on deck. You know what I mean? Like, the other muscles are working, so we don't need your help right now. First is when I, like, go too heavy. Maybe I can actually push that weight for sure, but it's all in my low back. Like, my low back is kicking in. I don't need her to kick in. I need her to shut the fuck up. Well, obviously, like, the RDL, you are going to be training your spinal erectors. Like, we have muscles in our low back, and they're doing work too. The problem is we don't want it to completely overtake the movement or feel it more in our low back than in our glutes. We also don't want to walk away and be sore in our low back for more than like a day or two. You know what I mean? A little low back soreness is okay, but several days or several weeks in a row with low back soreness, like maybe something's wrong. At that point, like maybe something is tweaked. I'm much prioritizing the mind-muscle connection, the slow and controlled movement, controlling the movement all the way down, spending time in the bottom and coming back up, then pushing big weight. I used to get really frustrated because I felt like my RDL was always so weak. And fair enough, I am a weak bitch. But now I have accepted that, like, it's okay if my RDL isn't my biggest lift. Like, I'm literally, the way that we RDL is literally putting our bodies in a position that makes it hard to lift big weight, right? Because we're doing it slow and controlled. We're like, when I do it, like I try to keep my knees kind of like not bent. Like I don't want my quads really helping at all. So like we're taking a lot of the other muscles out of it that would help us lift more weight. So sometimes it's a hard pill for me to swallow that, like, girl, you do not need that much weight today. Today you're a little bit weaker. Back off so you can actually feel it in the hammies. Tip number 4. I heard Dr. Mike and Jared Feather say this. Open the butthole. You want to almost like pull your butt cheeks apart and like flash your butthole to the world. So not only am I pushing my hips back, but I'm also like, anteriorly tilting my pelvis? Or is it posterior? Posterior pelvic tilt or anterior? I don't know. All I know is I'm sticking my ass out like I'm about to clap some cheeks, you know? Like when you're going to clap some cheeks, you're not going to keep your butt in. Throwing my ass back, and what this does is it pre-stretches the hamstrings. You're getting an even deeper stretch. I find that when I do that though, if I'm really focusing on doing that, I can't go as low as I usually do because the stretch is so deep. Number 5, that has really helped me, is finding a range of motion that is comfortable for me. So let me explain. What drives the stretch isn't bending over and rounding the spine. The movement is around the hip. So you'll notice people, after a certain point, they can't push their hips any further back and they start moving around the spine. That's when we run into trouble. You have to keep this as just a hip exercise. You're pushing your hips as far back as they can go. When your hips can't push any further back, you come back up. So for some people, if they don't have crazy hammy flexibility, their RDL isn't going to be as low as for others. I feel like I'm pretty flexible. Like if you've ever done yoga and they tell you to like bend in half like a table, like tabletop position, right? I feel like I got a pretty good tabletop position, but not everybody has a good tabletop position. So it's okay if you can't push your hips as far back as you would like. It's okay if you don't go all the way to parallel with your back to the floor. Because the point is to get the deepest stretch in the hammies as you can. And if this for you is already stretched as fuck, like you're doing the work. You're doing good. Hopefully with time, as you continue to strengthen and lengthen those muscles, you'll be able to access deeper ranges of motion. But what's the use of trying to go as low as you can if you're not even targeting the right muscle because you're just clacking around your spine? You know what I mean? You're not even performing the function that the hammies allow, which is they contribute to, they connect to the hips and shit. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. But yeah, don't go crazy. Pick a range of motion that makes the most sense for you. Maybe you can practice in the mirror. seeing how low you can go before your spine starts to have to come in the picture for you to get deeper. So go as deep as you can while keeping your back neutral, okay? We're not moving around the spine. Tip number 6. When I first started lifting, I was really nervous about getting injured. And so everyone said, you got to keep a straight spine, you got to keep a straight back, this and that. With time, we've learned that the spine isn't as fragile as we've made it out to seem like. We got to give our spine a little bit more credit. It's not necessarily about keeping your back straight, being that really what we want is a neutral spine. And if you look at a skeleton, like on a body, our spines aren't straight. There is a natural curve. So we don't need a straight spine. We need a neutral spine, whatever that may be. Even if there's a slight curve, that's okay. You'll see the strongest deadlifters in the world. Some of them have like a hunched upper back. What you want is a spine that is strong and is capable of moving that weight. So as long as your spine is locked in place, whatever that place is, sometimes I'll round my upper back. Sometimes I want to keep my chest nice and open. Like, it really depends for me. As long as I'm moving around my hips and I'm bracing the fuck out of my core. And what I like to tell people is bracing your core is basically preparing, like if somebody was going to like punch you in the gut, you brace. Brace for impact. Yeah, as long as my shit is neutral, it's fixed, and it's braced, it's fine. A little rounding of the upper spine is okay. Of the lower spine, maybe not as much, right? At least not for this specific exercise. There are exercises that people are doing out there to straighten their spine, and they're curving their spine all about. I haven't done that yet, so I can't speak on it. But for this specific exercise, a neutral, fixed, and braced spine is more than enough. Don't worry too much about having a perfectly straight spine, because I did for a while, and I feel like it was really holding me back from placing my spine in an optimal position that would allow me to progress every week and push as much weight as possible. Final tip number 7, basically, how do you bias hammies versus glutes? Less bend in the knee biases more hammies, more bend in the knee biases more glutes. So pick your poison. I try my best to keep my knee as straight as possible so I can get the biggest stretch in my hammies. Sometimes I'll get a little lazy though, and I'll start incorporating a bigger knee bend, and I'll feel it more in my glutes. That's just me though. That's just me. And of course, you will never progress the way that you want to progress if you're not keeping training notes and taking your sets close to failure. Like, you got to train hard, bitch, and you got to come back weeks and weeks and weeks on end doing better than you did last time. Maybe you don't need to go up in weight or in reps every single week, but as long as over time things are progressing and improving over the course of months, load is increasing, the reps are increasing, the mind-muscle connection is improving, the execution of the movement is improving, you're probably doing something right. All right. So that's the RDL. Really take your time with it. Keep practicing. Don't freak out too much about the low back thing, okay? A little back pump is all right. You just don't want to just only be feeling it in the low back, right? Like, do it slow, do it with intention, connect with that muscle, squeeze that muscle, and actually try and focus on feeling it where you're supposed to be feeling it. If you're feeling it where you're supposed to be feeling it, you're probably doing something right? So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, share it with someone that you think could also benefit from this information, and comment down below a cue that really made shit click for you if you try it. Let me know if you try it. All right, guys. Bye.